Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my colleague, host of Forbes Eye On Iowa, Sarah Muller. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Of course, I'm excited to be here.
I never know how to introduce you because you wear many hats. You're a producer, a reporter, most importantly, our boots on the ground in Iowa. So that's where I really want to begin. And we talk with you every few months to get kind of a pulse check, get a temperature on what's happening in Iowa. As you and I sit here right now, we're about 6 weeks away from the Iowa caucuses. So let's first talk about the polls. What are we seeing 6 weeks ahead of the first of the nation?
Well, I think we might even be less than 6 weeks away, but we have a lot going on here. Actually, we had a lot going on, and now that we've hit kind of the holiday season, it dies down for a smidge of time. But as soon as New Year's Eve comes around, New Year's Day, they are back in action for those last couple of weeks before we hit caucus time. So it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. It kind of sprung up on us. I feel like every time we do planning meetings, Brittany and I just kind of sit there and we're like, oh, we've got time. There's no more time. We are here and we're about ready to go.
And we are completely down to the wire. One thing we know for certain based on polls is that Trump is the front runner really in any GOP poll you look at. Why do you think that is?
I think a lot of what I'm hearing from different people who have either endorsed Trump or are still supporting Trump, they all say, at least we have, the person we know who's running, who has been in office before. Everybody's upset about the economy, right? And everybody blames Joe Biden for the economy. And so instead of looking at somebody new, they're looking at track records and they're saying, at least Donald Trump has been in office. We know him. We can support that the economy was at least better in his hands. And so that's what I'm hearing from a lot of supporters in his camp.
Let's dive into it just a little bit deeper. You talk to voters all throughout Iowa at these types of events, and since he announced he is running for president again for the third time, Trump has been charged with 91 felony counts across 4 jurisdictions. Simply put, do people care about his legal troubles?
Every time we talk about this, every time I talk about this with experts or people in the field, they all say the same thing. If you're in the Trump camp, you're in the Trump camp. You're not going to move. A lot of people see this as a witch hunt. They don't necessarily see these as valid charges against him. It was interesting to see people react to his behavior in court that we saw a few weeks ago. I mean, it is pretty bold for somebody on the stand to be pointing fingers and accusations around the room, including at the judge himself. So that's just kind of been an interesting take, but everybody kind of has, who is supporting Trump still, has this idea of, well, it's Trump. What do you expect? He is who he is, and that's just how he's going to act. And so I think as we look at these candidates, a lot of people are saying, well, again, we know Donald Trump's record. We've seen him in office. We know we can get a part 2 of that. Let's just sign up for that instead of trying to sign up for a wild card out here.
Aside from Trump, there's really 4 really main contenders here, and that is former Governor Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. So can you talk about those contenders and their presence in Iowa? What are you seeing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Trump has made a couple of appearances here, not necessarily doing rallies in the last couple of weeks, mostly doing smaller campaign events, which I think is going to benefit him in the long run. They've been primarily, Trump-based camps that he's been going to speak at. So it's already his audience, right? It's already people who are going to support him. He's not necessarily there to sway voters at this point, as it appears. So I think that's working in his favor because there's been lots of talk around how all these other candidates can afford to go to these smaller venues because they don't need to do giant rallies. They don't need to appeal to a bunch of people because they're not going to fill a room that big. They can go to the coffee shops. So again, what we're seeing from Trump is a lot of those smaller events. Ron DeSantis, just completed what we call the Grassley, the full Grassley, which is going to all 99 counties in Iowa.
And
There was a little
before you go, you describe that. Can you describe what is a Grassley for those at home who might not be familiar?
So Chuck Grassley has done this every single year for many, many years. I don't want to go back and date it, but he goes around to every single county and does events. And so he can hear from every single constituent in every single county as best as possible. So now they've called it the Grassley. The full Grassley is going to all 99 counties and campaigning. And Ron DeSantis just in this last week completed the 99 counties. And it was a little bit of a slam to him because Donald Trump did point out that Ryan Binkley, very underdog in this race, has already completed the full Grassley. And so it was kind of a moment of, okay, who can do it first? But yes, he just completed that, which is a huge accomplishment in the race. Nikki Haley has been in town. She's obviously splitting her time between here and New Hampshire. But the main thing right now is that she is devoting a lot of money to attack ads on DeSantis. So just this last couple of weeks, Forbes has reported that a super PAC who is aligned with Nikki Haley has put in more than $3.6 million on ads attacking Ron DeSantis and only $25,000 on ads attacking President Biden. So you're really seeing her campaign shift their efforts to attack the other lead in the race, which is Ron DeSantis. And then finally, Vivek Ramaswamy making numerous appearances in pizza ranches, which that's kind of like the staple of where you go other than coffee shops. Pizza ranches are pizza places which have buffets and like a lot of meeting rooms. And so he's been appearing there a lot across the state.
And obviously, since I was in Iowa, since we last spoke just a few months ago, the herd has really thinned out. I mean, Tim Scott dropping out, that was a surprise. I remember when you and I were messaging about that, we were shocked. Doug Burgum dropped out, amongst others. And I want to talk about the underdogs and dark horses because Trump clearing away the front runner, but everyone's fighting for that number 2. Who do you think could be a dark horse come 6 weeks from now for the Iowa caucus?
Look, anything can happen. Even Nikki Haley in the last couple of weeks has really come up through the ranks. I mean, she was always kind of a middle ground person, keeping her numbers decent, but not really pulling ahead. And I think that last debate really had her performing well. And I think, her experience, her way of handling some of her competitors on stage, specifically Vivek Ramaswamy. But if we look at some of the other people, I just want to call out, Christie hasn't even shown up in the state to my knowledge. He's not even putting his efforts here. Asa Hutchinson has been around a little bit. Honestly, I'm waiting for him to drop at any point. He's too low on the polls right now. He doesn't have that name recognition. Sometimes when I pull out his name to voters, they go, who? And I have to say, Governor Asa Hutchinson. And he just doesn't have that name recognition at this point in the race. And then finally, Ryan Binkley, like I said, he did the 99 counties. He's doing everything he possibly can to get that name recognition. Now, whether or not he'll get it in time, that's to be told, but I highly doubt it.
Something that you mentioned is that Christie has little to no presence in Iowa. He's really putting all of his eggs in the New Hampshire basket. Do people in Iowa care about that, or how much do they care about that? Do they feel slighted that he's totally skipping the state?
I don't think anybody I've spoken to really has Christie on their radar. I have not had a single person tell me that Christie is who they are interested in voting for, partially because he hasn't shown up. Really, we weed out here in Iowa, we weed out the people who are, taking this seriously. And I think a lot of people feel like this is just a campaign to go against Trump. This isn't him actually trying to run for president. It's him trying to find a platform to talk about Trump, which we see in almost every single debate, which, speaking of, there's another one tonight, and to be told whether we'll hear more of that message. But I don't think a lot of people have Christie on their radar, and I think that's going to hurt him in the long run.
I know you talk to voters of all ages, but I'm curious specifically about the younger generation. Where are they going to caucus?
So there are a lot of caucus locations in each town, in each city. As an Iowa State University grad, I went to Ames, and there are places on campus to vote. There are going to be places really close to campus to vote. So they make it very accessible. Actually, when I was in college, they did a mock caucus. We did them growing up too sometimes, where they would do the caucus, a mock caucus, just to show you what the experience will be like. So you go feeling ready to do it, which is kind of fun. And it's also extremely great to bring awareness to young voters.
My first caucus experience was 4 years ago, and from Pennsylvania, I didn't grow up with these mock caucuses, but I wish I did. It is a once in a lifetime, or probably every 4 years in a lifetime experience if you are from Iowa. I do now want to pivot just a little bit and talk about endorsements. Obviously, they can make or break a candidate if they get a few good endorsements. That really gets the ball rolling. It really provides the momentum. Are there any endorsements of note for any candidate that you want to talk about?
Absolutely. I've got a full list.
Perfect. Well, we've got time, so let's go.
Well, the first one that everybody's talking about is obviously Kim Reynolds, Governor Kim Reynolds endorsing Ron DeSantis. This is huge. At the beginning of the campaign, I even spoke to her comms team, and they said, don't bring up any endorsements because she's not going to endorse anybody. It's a waste of time. Like, just don't worry about endorsing anybody or her endorsing anybody, because she's not going to do it. And so it's kind of interesting that she pulled the trigger and did it. Her reasoning was that she wanted to keep the state open and welcome to all GOP candidates, and make sure no one didn't feel like they couldn't come because she had already endorsed somebody. And then obviously there were some comments made by Donald Trump saying that, he had put her in office, helped put her in office with his endorsement. Why isn't she giving hers? And so then it turns around and she endorses Ron DeSantis. And this was kind of interesting. Right after the endorsement, right after they took the stage, they sat down with the local newspaper, the Des Moines Register, and a wonderful reporter there sat down and asked some really great questions, one of which she asked, some people may see this as not just an endorsement for DeSantis, but an endorsement against Trump. And she specifically said, yeah, I don't think he can lead us. Not a direct quote, but she was very brazen about saying he's not the one. Not this time. And so that was a big deal. Bob Vanderplatz is the president and CEO of the Family Leader. He endorsed DeSantis. This doesn't come as a huge surprise because earlier this year there was an article saying that he did see the nation going into a different direction than Trump. He's just a huge political leader here in Iowa. And so that was a massive endorsement for DeSantis. Donald Trump has received 2 fairly significant endorsements here in Iowa. Obviously, state senators and representatives will endorse different candidates, but the main one was Iowa State Senator Brad Zahn. He's kind of interesting because he has always been a real Trump supporter. Even earlier this year, he condemned any jail time for those who participated in January 6th. Local Iowans may remember him from bringing a gun into the airport a couple years ago and saying he forgot he had it on him. And so that was kind of a big news story. But he's always been like a big Second Amendment person, a big Trump supporter. So that really wasn't too surprising. However, the other endorsement that Trump got was Attorney General Brenna Bird. I spoke to her earlier this fall about her endorsement. It's interesting. This is her first time in office at a state level, and she's already coming out with an endorsement. And she was very much on the train of, I'm supporting Trump, and I think he can lead our country into a better direction than Biden has. It was very Biden versus Trump-esque instead of Trump versus other candidates. So that was an interesting dynamic. Other than that, we've obviously seen more national endorsements, such as Larry Elder endorsing Trump. He even met with him at Mar-a-Lago about the endorsement. Perry Johnson endorsed Trump. Will Hurd endorsed Nikki Haley. There's multiple candidates that have dropped out who have not endorsed. But it's also important to notice that all Iowa U.S. senators and representatives have not endorsed. So Chuck Grassley, Joni Ernst, Zach Nunn, Marionette Miller-Meeks, Ashley Hinson, and Randy Feenstra have all not endorsed. And it's to be determined whether they will. I think it's a matter of should should we keep the peace here on whoever ends up being the nominee?
I do want to talk about the heaviest hitter you named, probably when it comes to Iowa, and that's Governor Kim Reynolds. First, is she well liked in Iowa? How do people receive her as governor? Do they like her leadership? And second, how much does that move the needle for Governor Ron DeSantis?
I think it wasn't too far off the mark to say she was going to endorse him. It was really just going to be between, I think people were thinking it was going to be Donald Trump, DeSantis, or maybe Nikki Haley. But other than that, I mean, she's fairly well liked. I think she's very polarizing. If you go and ask any Iowan, how do you feel about Kim Reynolds? They will either love her or not. And it's very obvious. So people feel strongly about how she handled school choice, how she handles recent laws around transgender athletics. Her handling in Iowa is very similar to how Ron DeSantis has run Florida. And so I think this is a very easy parallel, but I also think it's not too far off to say that maybe she's striving for a VP role here. And I know that's been a conversation in the making. So we'll see if she does get on the ticket. But for the meantime, it is quite a pull for DeSantis, but it's not entirely surprising.
Let's look ahead to the future a bit here. In the coming weeks, what is on your radar as someone who is on the ground in Iowa? What are you looking out for next? And what are you going to put on our radar?
So obviously we have a debate as of while we're recording this tonight, and that will be another huge push or not for candidates. And then besides that, like I said, we're kind of in a lull between Thanksgiving and Christmas. They really take some time off. They'll come and do some events, but it's not as big of a push. But as soon as January 1st is here, they are pushing those last 2 weeks. And so we will have full coverage of the last weekend of their time here on the ground. And then we'll have our eyes set on New Hampshire.
Well, Sarah Muller, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your reporting, for your insights. I look forward to having you back. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Brittany.